The twin suns of Silkara burned brightly over the jagged mountains, casting sharp shadows across the bustling capital city of Threxer. It was a city alive with activity. Traders peddled exotic wares, engineers maintained towering structures, and warriors trained relentlessly in preparation for the ever-present threat of war. Yet within the grand palace at the city's heart, Queen Zivlax stood alone, her sharp claws clicking against the polished obsidian floor as she gazed out at her people. Her reflection on the glass told a story she had heard too often. Her vibrant blue scales shimmered in the sunlight, a color the Threxer despised. Among her kind, shades of green, gray, or red symbolized strength and resilience. But blue? It was a mark of weakness, or so they claimed. It didn't matter that Zivlax was one of the most skilled strategists her species had ever known. It didn't matter that her diplomatic efforts had prevented 2 major wars with neighboring planets. All they saw was an ugly queen unworthy of her throne. The throne room was cavernous, adorned with banners from past conquests. Zivlax should have felt proud standing there, but the whispers of her court echoed in her mind. No Threxer male will ever take her as a mate, they said. Our queen cannot even unite her people. How can she rule a galaxy? The pressure to secure a mate was immense. Tradition demanded it. An unwed queen was seen as incomplete, vulnerable. But every attempt Zivlax had made to find a partner had ended in rejection. Some dismissed her outright, mocking her appearance. Others feigned interest, only to disappear when they realized she wasn't easily manipulated. Even off-world suitors, who might have overlooked her scales, found excuses to decline her hand. "Your Majesty." A deep voice broke her thoughts. She turned to see her chief advisor, Carvax, bowing slightly. His green scales glinted under the light of the room's chandeliers. The council grows restless. They demand action. Zivlax's eyes narrowed. Action. They mean a mate, she said sharply. Her voice was calm, yet the frustration beneath it was clear. What good is a mate who would rather see me fail than stand beside me? Carvax hesitated. The people need a symbol of unity. Without it, the fractures in our society will deepen. The nobles talk of rebellion. We cannot afford weakness. Not now. Zivlax turned away, her claws curling into fists. I am not weak, she said quietly, though it felt more like a reminder to herself than to her advisor. If they refuse to see my strength, I will find another way to prove it. Carvax stepped closer. And what do you propose, my queen? Zivlax looked out at the sky, where distant stars glittered like tiny beacons. If the Threxer will not accept me, perhaps someone beyond our borders will, she said. Her voice grew firmer, laced with determination. Draft a message, Carvax. A call to all corners of the galaxy. Let it be known that Silkara seeks an ally, a partner who values action over appearance, unity over division. Carvax's eyes widened. An open call for a mate. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. It could attract undesirables, or it could attract the very ally we need. Zivlax replied. I will not let tradition dictate my rule. If my people cannot see the value in me, then I will find someone who does. Let them call me desperate if they wish. I will not let Silkara fall because of their short-sightedness. Carvax bowed again, though his expression remained uncertain. As you command, my queen. The message will be sent. As he departed, Zivlax allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. She placed a clawed hand on the cold glass and closed her eyes. She had fought her entire life to prove her worth, not just to her people, but to herself. Now the survival of her planet rested on finding someone willing to stand by her side. Far beyond the borders of Silkara, she knew countless civilizations thrived. Surely, among them, there was someone who could see past the surface and recognize the strength within. Someone who would not only marry a queen, but also fight for a world that wasn't their own. As the stars twinkled above, a small spark of hope flickered in Zivlax's heart. Somewhere out there, the answer awaited. The message from Silkara spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried on waves of energy and encoded signals that reached even the farthest corners of space. It was bold, unusual, and to some, downright desperate. But for James Carter, it was intriguing. James sat in a dimly lit lounge aboard a human starship, the Odyssey, which floated in orbit around Earth. The ship's hum was constant, a soothing backdrop to the quiet conversations of diplomats and traders mingling nearby. James stared at the holoscreen in front of him, rereading the call from Silkera for what felt like the 100th time. Seeking a partner, it read, a union of minds and strength. Silkera offers an alliance built on trust, shared purpose, and resilience. Appearance means nothing. Actions will define you. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his messy brown hair. Most humans would have dismissed the message as absurd. A queen seeking a mate from strangers across the stars. Ridiculous. But James saw something different. He saw an opportunity. Still staring at that message, Carter. A familiar voice interrupted. It was Mira, his colleague and occasional sparring partner in the diplomatic corps. She plopped into the seat across from him, her short black hair gleaming under the low lights. Let me guess, you're actually thinking about responding. James smirked. It's not just any message, Mira. It's a cry for help wrapped in a marriage proposal. You don't see that every day. Mira rolled her eyes. And you think swooping in to marry some alien queen is going to solve her problems? You're not exactly prince material. Thanks for the vote of confidence, James said dryly. Look, this isn't about romance. It's about diplomacy. Humanity's still finding its place in the galaxy. We need allies, strong ones, and Silker is a major player. If their queen is willing to take a chance on a human, it could open doors for Earth we didn't even know existed. Mira frowned, leaning forward. And what if it backfires? What if this queen just wants to use you as a pawn? Or worse, what if her people see you as some kind of intruder? James shrugged. Risk is part of the job, isn't it? Besides, I'm not exactly swimming in options here. Ever since the Terathian fiasco, I've been sidelined. If I don't do something big, I'll be stuck shuffling papers on Earth until I retire. Mira sighed, her expression softening. You're serious about this, aren't you? He nodded. I am. Someone has to show that humans can think beyond our own little planet. If that means marrying an alien queen, so be it. A few days later, James found himself on a small diplomatic shuttle hurtling through hyperspace toward Silkera. The journey was uneventful, but his mind buzzed with questions. What would the queen be like in person? Would the Threxer even accept him? And most importantly, could this bold gamble actually work? When the shuttle emerged from hyperspace, Silkera loomed before him, a planet of jagged continents and swirling blue oceans. Its twin suns bathed the surface in a golden glow, making the mountains shimmer like polished stone. The sight was breathtaking, but James had little time to admire it. A landing beacon guided the shuttle to the capital, and moments later, he was stepping onto the polished obsidian landing pad of the royal palace. Threxer guards flanked the entrance, their reptilian forms towering over James. Their sharp eyes regarded him with a mix of curiosity and disdain, but they said nothing as they escorted him inside. The palace was a marvel of alien architecture, with towering spires, intricate carvings, and glowing crystals that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. At last, he was led to the throne room. The massive doors creaked open, revealing Queen Zivlax seated on her throne. She was more striking in person than James had expected. Her blue scales shimmered like liquid sapphire, catching the light with every movement. Her golden eyes were sharp, intelligent, and unyielding. "You are the human who answered my call," Zivlax said, her voice resonating through the chamber. James stepped forward, bowing slightly. "James Carter, at your service, Your Majesty." The Queen studied him, her gaze unwavering. "Do you understand what you've volunteered for, human? This is not a game. My people are divided, my rule is fragile, and the galaxy watches our every move. A misstep could mean the end of my reign, and your life. I understand, James replied firmly. But I believe in what you're trying to do. I'm not here to play games, Your Majesty. I'm here to help. A flicker of something, approval, perhaps, crossed Zivlax's face. We shall see if your actions match your words, she said. As James stood before her, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. The challenge ahead was daunting, but for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The sun dipped below the horizon of Silkara, casting a blood-red glow over the land. The air was thick with tension as the royal court gathered for an important announcement. Queen Zivlax stood at the center of the grand hall, her blue scales catching the light as she addressed her subjects. The marble floor gleamed beneath her feet, and the high ceilings echoed with murmurs of anticipation. James stood slightly to the side, his hands clasped behind his back. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The entire court, nobles, military leaders, and advisors, were waiting for the Queen's next move. He had never seen such an assembly before, and the solemnity of the room made his stomach tighten. But this wasn't just another diplomatic mission. This was the beginning of something far greater. Zivlax's golden eyes scanned the room, and the murmurs slowly quieted. With a calm but commanding voice, she began. "My people," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "I stand before you today not just as your queen, but as a ruler who seeks to secure the future of Silkara. For too long, we have fought among ourselves. Too long, we have rejected new possibilities. The universe offers us endless opportunities, yet we continue to turn away from them." A few heads nodded, while others exchanged skeptical glances. The Threxar were a proud people, loyal to their traditions. They had always held the belief that strength and unity came from within, not from foreign alliances. Zivlax's proposal, an alliance with an outsider, a human, was nothing short of revolutionary. James felt the weight of their stares. Some regarded him with disdain, others with curiosity. He was an outsider, a human in a room full of aliens who had never seen a species like his before, but he didn't let it faze him. He had a job to do, and he was determined to do it well. Zivlax's voice broke through his thoughts, sharp and strong. "This human, James Carter, has answered our call. He offers us not only an alliance but a partnership built on trust, mutual respect, and the strength of our actions. In exchange for his help, I have agreed to a political marriage. Together, we will strengthen our kingdom and unite our people." A shocked silence fell over the room. James could feel the eyes of every noble and advisor on him, judging him, wondering how he would respond. He had expected resistance, but this was different. He had never imagined that the Queen would go this far, offering such an intimate bond as a symbol of unity. It was a gamble, one that could either heal the rift in her kingdom or tear it apart completely. But Zivlax wasn't done yet. "Do not mistake this union for weakness," she continued, her voice unwavering. "It is a union of strength and resolve. We will face the challenges ahead together, and we will emerge stronger for it. Silkara will no longer stand alone in the universe. We will open our borders to new alliances, new opportunities, and new allies." The court was still silent. James glanced at the faces around him, reading the uncertainty in their expressions. Some looked shocked, others angry, and a few seemed to consider the idea seriously. There was a tense moment where no one spoke, and the weight of the decision seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. Finally, one of the Threxar nobles, a tall, green-scaled male with piercing amber eyes, stood up. "You would have us accept a human as one of our own, and worse, marry him. Do you truly believe that this is the answer, my queen?" Zivlax met his gaze without flinching. "I believe that our people are dying, as long as we cling to outdated notions of superiority. We are strong, but we have become fragmented. I will not let that be our downfall. If a human is what it takes to bring us together, then I will accept that. I ask for your support, not your judgment." The noble growled low in his throat, but he did not speak further. Others exchanged quiet words among themselves, and James could sense the growing tension in the room. But he stood firm, reminding himself that this was why he was here, to be the one to support Zivlax, to stand by her side in this unprecedented moment. Another voice rose, this one from a female noble with silvery scales and a regal air. We will not be so easily swayed. A union with a human may grant us new strength, but it may also expose us to dangers we cannot foresee. Zivlax raised a clawed hand, silencing the room once more. The dangers are already here. We are divided, our enemies close at hand. We need something to unite us, something bold. If this is the price I must pay, then I will pay it for the future of Silkera. James couldn't help but admire her strength. Despite the tension, Zivlax stood tall, unwavering in her conviction. He had expected fear, uncertainty, even doubt, but instead, she radiated a quiet confidence that demanded respect. I stand with you, Queen Zivlax, James said, his voice cutting through the silence. I don't care about the traditions, the doubts, or the fears. I believe in what you're doing. I believe that together we can make Silkera stronger. The room fell silent again, but this time there was a shift. Some of the nobles' expressions softened, and the whispers began to fade. Zivlax turned to him, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of gratitude and determination. We will begin our work immediately, she said, her voice resolute. Let no one doubt that Silkera's future begins today. As the court slowly dispersed, James felt a sense of something new stirring within him. The journey ahead would be long, and the road would be difficult, but he knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. The days that followed Zivlax's bold proposal were filled with tension and uncertainty. The palace, once a symbol of pride for the Threxer people, now seemed like a battleground. Courtiers, military leaders, and nobles met behind closed doors, whispering in hushed voices. Some supported the queen's decision, while others plotted behind her back, convinced that an alliance with a human would spell the end of Silkera's sovereignty. Zivlax stood at the head of her council table, her eyes scanning the room. She had heard the rumors, the doubts, and the harsh criticism of her decision, but she would not be swayed. She could feel the weight of the future pressing down on her shoulders. This was her kingdom, her people, and she would fight for them, no matter the cost. Queen Zivlax began a tall noble with dark green scales, his voice laced with suspicion. You ask us to put our faith in this human, to accept him as an ally, as a partner in our rule. Yet, we know nothing of his true intentions. How can we trust him? Zivlax met his gaze with unwavering confidence. We must trust, or we will be lost. The universe is changing, and we must change with it. I am not asking you to trust him blindly. I am asking you to see beyond his species, beyond his appearance, and recognize the strength he offers. James stood by her side, his arms crossed. He had heard the whispers, felt the cold stares of the nobles. They were skeptical, afraid of the unknown, and in many ways, James understood that fear. But he was here to prove that humanity could be more than just another player in the galaxy. It could be a true ally. To prove that the alliance was more than just a political gesture, Zivlax proposed a series of trials. They would test the strength of their partnership, their ability to work together under pressure, and their willingness to fight for the future of Silkera. It was a bold move, one that would either unite the kingdom or tear it apart. The first trial took place in the wilds of Silkera, far from the safety of the capital. The Threxer planet was a harsh place, full of towering cliffs, dense forests, and dangerous creatures that had long since evolved to thrive in the unforgiving environment. The trial would be a test of survival. James had never experienced anything like this before. The terrain was rugged, the air thin, and the wildlife unpredictable. Massive serpentine creatures slithered through the underbrush, their scales camouflaged against the vibrant flora. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift and tremble with each step, as though the planet itself was alive, watching their every move. Zivlax led the way, her keen senses alert to every sound and movement around them. Her claws scraped against the stone as she scaled a rocky outcrop with ease, her eyes scanning the horizon. James, struggling to keep up, marveled at her agility. She was a force of nature, a queen who had survived countless battles and threats. But this was different. This was about more than just physical strength. It was about proving that they could work as a team. The trial was designed to test not just survival skills, but also teamwork. James and Zivlax were tasked with reaching a specific point on the other side of the forest, where a beacon would signal their success. The journey would be fraught with danger, from wild beasts to the treacherous terrain. And along the way, they would face tests of character, decisions that would determine whether they could truly trust each other. Hours passed, and the trial grew more difficult. James was exhausted, his muscles aching, but Zivlax never slowed down. She moved with a purpose, her steps sure and confident. At one point, they were forced to cross a river that stretched wide and fast, its waters swirling with powerful currents. James hesitated, unsure of the best way to approach. "Jump," Zivlax said simply, her voice firm. James glanced at the raging water below, and then at her. "Are you sure?" Zivlax nodded. "Trust me." Without another word, she leaped. James followed, his heart racing, as they both landed on the opposite bank. The water splashed around them, soaking their clothes, but they had made it. He couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It was one of the first moments where he truly felt like they were working together as a team, united by a common goal. But the trial was far from over. As night fell, the two of them set up camp in the shadows of a towering cliff. The air grew colder, and the sounds of unseen creatures echoed in the distance. Zivlax kept watch while James attempted to start a fire. Despite the cold, he felt a sense of warmth in her presence. She was strong, fierce, but there was a quiet understanding between them now. They weren't just allies. They were something more. As they settled down for the night, Zivlax spoke softly, her voice carrying over the crackling of the fire. "You've done well, human. I didn't expect you to make it this far." James chuckled, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. "You thought I'd quit. I didn't come all this way just to give up." She smiled, though it was brief. "Good, because this is only the beginning. The real challenge comes when we return to the capital." James nodded, his mind racing. They had passed the first trial, but the path ahead was still uncertain. The nobles, the rebels, the threats both within and beyond the planet. He knew that their alliance would be tested time and time again, but he also knew one thing: they would face it together. And together, they might just change the course of Silcura's future. James and Queen Zivlax returned to the capital after completing the first trial, their journey through the wilds of Silcura a hard-earned success. They were exhausted but proud. The forest had tested them in ways they hadn't expected, but it had also proven something crucial. They were capable of working together. Zivlax's strength, her wisdom, and her confidence had guided them, but James had held his own. They had become more than just allies in a political game. They were partners, each bringing something unique to the table. But as they entered the heart of Silcura's capital city, the weight of their task became even more apparent. The royal palace loomed before them, its spires reaching for the sky, and the courtiers and advisors waited in the grand hall for their return. The atmosphere was tense, thick with anticipation. This was where the real challenge would begin. Zivlax stood tall as they entered, her scales gleaming under the palace's bright lights. The nobles who had once questioned her decision to marry a human now watched her closely, their eyes sharp and calculating. James could feel the skepticism in the air, but he didn't let it shake him. This was their moment, and they couldn't afford to lose it. "My queen," one of the nobles, a male with dark purple scales, said in a cold, measured voice, "we have heard word of your success in the wilds. Yet I wonder, is this enough to prove that you have made the right choice in this human?" A simple test of survival does not make him a ruler of Silkera. Zivlax's gaze was unwavering. She stepped forward, her posture commanding. This is only the beginning. The trials will continue, and they will challenge more than just our ability to survive. They will test our leadership, our unity, and our commitment to Silkera's future. This human, this man, will stand beside me. Together, we will prove that we are the right path forward for this kingdom. Her words were bold, but the doubt in the room was palpable. The noble who had spoken earlier, as well as others, exchanged uneasy glances. James could sense that the challenges ahead would not be easy. He wasn't just fighting for political power. He was fighting to prove that humans could stand alongside the Threxer as equals. The next trial was one that James had not anticipated. A test of leadership. Zivlax had called upon her inner circle, her trusted advisors, and the most influential figures in the kingdom to participate in a series of debates, discussions, and strategic planning exercises. The goal was simple: to show that their partnership wasn't a fleeting alliance, but a true merging of minds, one that could lead Silkera into a brighter future. The first debate took place in a large chamber, where James and Zivlax were seated at a round table surrounded by high-ranking officials. The subject was critical: the future of Silkera's military strategy. With enemies on all sides, the Threxar had to decide whether to expand their forces or seek diplomatic solutions. Zivlax, who had always relied on military strength to maintain control, was eager to hear James's perspective. The debate began with a heated discussion. The generals and military leaders argued fiercely for the need to build a stronger army, to dominate the stars and assert their power. But James, who had spent years in diplomacy, had a different idea. He spoke calmly, his voice steady as he outlined a vision of peace, one where alliances with neighboring races could secure their borders without further bloodshed. "I understand the need for strength," James said, looking around at the assembled leaders. "But Silkera does not have to dominate through force alone. We can build stronger alliances, gain influence through diplomacy, and secure peace. The galaxy is vast, and our future lies in cooperation, not in isolation." Zivlax nodded, but she knew that convincing the military leaders would not be easy. She turned to the head general, a stern female with red scales, who had not yet spoken. "General Kivara," Zivlax said, her voice measured. "What do you think of this approach?" Kivara's amber eyes narrowed as she met James's gaze. "You speak of peace, human. But peace requires trust, and trust is something we have not earned with the other races. We have always ruled through strength, and that is how we will continue." James took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Trust can be built, General. It is not given freely, but it can be earned through our actions. If we show the galaxy that we are willing to work together, to share resources and knowledge, then we can create a lasting peace. We don't need to strike first. We need to be a beacon of strength and wisdom." The room fell silent as the debate continued, but James could see that the seeds of doubt had been planted in some of the generals' minds. Zivlax, who had been a fierce advocate for military expansion, was beginning to consider his words more seriously. The trial of leadership wasn't just about winning the argument. It was about showing that they could both lead, both work together for the good of Silkera. By the end of the discussion, no clear decision had been made, but there was a shift in the room. The military leaders were still uncertain, but they were no longer closed off to the idea of diplomacy. And for the first time, some of the nobles who had been skeptical about James's role began to see him as an equal partner in this new vision for Silkera. Later that evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Zivlax turned to James. "You did well today. Your words were convincing, and the generals are beginning to listen. But this is just the first step." James smiled, though he could see the weight of the challenge ahead. "I'm not done yet. We've got a lot more to prove, but we'll get there." Zivlax looked up at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "I know. Together, we will show them the future they cannot see." And in that moment, as they stood side by side, James felt a deeper connection to the Queen than ever before. The trials had only just begun, but the road ahead was one they would walk together. The next few weeks were filled with tension. The trials that Queen Zivlax had set in motion were not just a test for James and her. It was a test for all of Silkera. The kingdom, once united under the power of its queen, was now fractured by different opinions on how to lead and what path to follow. The people were divided. Some had begun to accept the human as a worthy ally, while others viewed his presence as an insult to their traditions. Zivlax could feel the weight of the division every time she walked through the grand halls of the palace. The whispers of doubt, the glares from certain nobles, they were all reminders that not everyone was ready to embrace change. James, too, could sense the growing unease. His role in the kingdom had never been entirely clear. He was the human who had married a queen, the outsider who had become part of a deeply rooted alien culture. He had no illusions about his place in Silkera. But he also knew that he couldn't leave now, not after everything they had been through. One afternoon, Zivlax summoned him to her private chambers. She stood by a large window, looking out over the sprawling city below, her hands clasped behind her back. The weight of leadership had never seemed so heavy on her shoulders. "James," she said, her voice low but resolute, "there is no denying it now. The kingdom is divided. The trials have been hard on us, and they have revealed the true depth of our people's doubts. We've made some progress, but the road ahead is still full of obstacles." James stepped closer, studying her face. She looked more tired than usual, as though the weight of the crown had grown heavier over time. He could see it in her eyes, the strain of making the right decisions, the burden of leading a kingdom that was on the verge of either flourishing or collapsing. "We've come this far," James said gently. "I know it's hard, but we can't back down now. We have to keep pushing forward." Zivlax turned to face him, her golden eyes filled with determination. "I know," she said firmly, "but not everyone will accept us. Not all of the nobles will support our vision. There are those who will use this division to take control of Silkera. The next trial is crucial, James. If we fail, the entire kingdom could fall into chaos." James nodded. "What do we have to do?" She stepped forward, her claws clicking softly against the stone floor. "The next trial will test our ability to unite the people. We will host a grand assembly, a gathering of all the factions, the nobles, the military leaders, and the common folk. They will decide whether they trust us to lead, whether they believe in the future we are building. It will be a vote of confidence, one that could either secure our rule or bring us down." The gravity of her words hit James like a wave. The assembly would be their final chance to prove that their partnership could work, that their union wasn't just a political maneuver, but the beginning of a new era for Silkera. If they failed, the kingdom could fracture beyond repair. Zivlax's voice softened as she continued. "The leaders who oppose us will do everything they can to sway the vote. They will use fear, distrust, and the old ways to turn the people against us. But we have something they do not: our unity, our vision for the future." James knew she was right. They had come too far to lose now. "We'll make them see," he said with resolve. "We'll show them that the old ways are holding Silkera back. We need to stand together, stronger than ever." Zivlax smiled faintly. "I knew you would say that. You are becoming more like us every day, James. I couldn't ask for a better partner." The day of the assembly arrived, and the air in the capital was thick with anticipation. Nobles and commoners alike gathered in the grand hall, their faces a mix of hope, uncertainty, and skepticism. The room was filled with murmurs, as people from all walks of life waited to see what would happen. Zivlax entered first, her presence commanding attention. Her regal posture and powerful aura filled the room, but her eyes, though strong, betrayed a hint of nervousness. James followed closely behind, feeling the weight of the moment. The assembly was a turning point for Silkera, and they had no choice but to succeed. Once they were seated at the front of the room, The crowd quieted, and the proceedings began. One by one, the noble families and military leaders took the floor, presenting their arguments against Xivlax's reign. They spoke of old traditions, the fear of losing Silkura's power to an outsider, and their deep-rooted belief that the old ways were the only ways. The words were harsh, but they weren't unexpected. When it was their turn to speak, Xivlax stood tall, her voice steady and firm. "My people," she began, her words carrying through the hall, "I stand before you not as your queen, but as a fellow citizen of Silkura. We all want what is best for this kingdom. I ask you to look not at the color of his skin or the origin of his birth, but at the strength of his heart. James Carter stands with me, as a partner, not an invader. Together, we will lead Silkura to a future of unity, strength, and prosperity." Her words were powerful, and for a moment, the room fell into a heavy silence. James could see the doubt in some of the nobles' faces starting to fade, replaced with cautious curiosity. It was then that the final speaker took the stage, General Kivera. Her amber eyes scanned the room before turning to Xivlax and James. "I once doubted you both," she said, her voice commanding but respectful. "But I now see the strength of your vision. I may not agree with everything, but I will fight alongside you for the future of Silkura." The crowd held its breath as the vote began. Each individual stepped forward, casting their vote in silence. The tension was unbearable as they waited for the results. Finally, the count was finished. Xivlax's heart raced as the numbers were read aloud. The vote had been close, but in the end, it was a victory. Silkura had chosen to follow their leadership, and the future seemed brighter than it had in years. But Xivlax knew this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more trials ahead. But for now, they had won. Together. The days following the assembly were filled with a sense of cautious optimism. Silkura had made its choice. The kingdom had voted in favor of Queen Xivlax and James, the human who had become her partner in more ways than one. But despite the victory, both knew the real work had only just begun. The challenges ahead were many, and the kingdom was still fractured in places. Trust had been built, but there were still doubts lingering in the minds of some. James and Xivlax spent their days working tirelessly, meeting with leaders from every faction, from the military to the common folk. They listened to concerns, answered questions, and above all, they showed the people that they were committed to a future of unity. Xivlax's leadership skills were unmatched, but now she had something even more valuable: James's perspective. He helped her navigate the complexities of diplomacy, offering insights into the human way of thinking, which was often very different from the Threxers. Their bond, both personal and political, had only grown stronger. They were no longer just a queen and her human ally. They were partners in every sense of the word. But even as the future of Silkura seemed to be heading toward a brighter future, there were still those who refused to accept the changes. In the shadows of the palace, a group of nobles who had opposed the union began to form alliances of their own. They whispered in dark corners, planning how they could regain control of the kingdom and push Xivlax and James from the throne. One evening, as Xivlax and James walked through the palace gardens, talking about the next steps for their kingdom, they were approached by one of Xivlax's trusted advisors, a young Threxer named Virus. His face was pale, and his usual calm demeanor was replaced by a nervous urgency. "My queen, James," Virus began, his voice low. "I have troubling news. There are whispers in the capital. Some of the nobles are plotting against you. They refuse to accept the changes you're bringing to Silkura. They are trying to rally support to overthrow you." James's heart sank. He had known that not everyone would be happy with the changes they were making, but this was more serious than he had anticipated. Xivlax's face hardened, her golden eyes flashing with determination. "I knew this day would come. The old guard will always resist change, but they cannot stop what is already in motion. We will not be threatened by them." Virus nodded. "I have heard that they plan to take action soon. They have allies in the military and among the common folk. We must be prepared. Zivlax turned to James, her gaze steady. We will handle this together. I will not let anyone tear this kingdom apart, especially not from within. James nodded, his resolve strengthening. We've already proven we can overcome obstacles. This is just another one. We'll stand firm, and we'll show them that Silkera is stronger than their plots. In the following days, Zivlax and James made preparations for the worst. They knew that the nobles would not back down easily, and that the peace they had worked so hard to build could easily be destroyed. They worked tirelessly to gain the support of the military and the common people, emphasizing that their strength was in unity, not division. Zivlax addressed the people in a public speech, her voice carrying over the streets of the capital as she spoke of the future they would build together. She reminded them of the importance of working as one, and of how far Silkera had come since their union with humanity had begun. Her words were powerful, and slowly she began to win back the trust of the people. But the plot against them had not been silenced. Late one night, James and Zivlax received word that the rebels had moved against them. They had taken control of several key points within the city, and the palace was at risk. There was no time to waste. Get to the royal chamber, Zivlax ordered Virus. Alert the guards. We'll handle this ourselves. James and Zivlax raced through the corridors of the palace, their minds focused on the task ahead. The rebellion had come quickly, but they were ready. The time for words was over. Now was the time for action. The two of them fought side by side, their combined strength unstoppable. James, though human, had trained under Zivlax's guidance and had learned the ways of the Threxer people. He wasn't as fast or as strong as her, but he had developed a new confidence, a determination to protect the future of Silkera. The rebels were not expecting the ferocity of the queen and her human partner. Zivlax fought with the precision of a warrior, her claws slicing through the air, while James used his agility and quick thinking to disarm and disable their opponents. By the time they reached the heart of the palace, the rebel forces had been broken. The plot had been foiled, and peace had been restored, at least for now. Exhausted but victorious, James and Zivlax stood in the royal hall, looking out over the city. "You were amazing," James said, his voice full of admiration. Zivlax smiled, her eyes softening. "We were amazing, James. This is not just my victory. It's ours." The future of Silkera was uncertain, but as long as they stood together, they knew they could face whatever came their way. They had built something strong, something worth fighting for. And with the strength of their bond, the kingdom of Silkera would thrive, not just because of a queen or a human, but because of the unity they had forged. Together, they had become the future of Silkera.